listening session hosted by the Dudley Board of Selectmen and the Dudley Regional School Committee. And the Dudley Charlton Regional School Committee to talk about the proposed Prop 2.5 budget override that will be on the ballot at the end of the month. In the past, we've had presentations, and today is more about following up on potential questions that might still be needed to be answered. And I'm just going to go over the way we're going to handle this today. So has anyone been to a town meeting? All right, about half of you. All right, to be recognized this evening, please stand at your seat and wait my direction to approach the microphone. You must be at the microphone unless a physical condition makes this difficult for you, in which case raise your hand. It will make you visible and will assist in getting you the opportunity to speak. If you're speaking on multiple points this evening, please state your name and address at each time you speak. In order to maintain decorum and keep the meeting engaged with civility, you may not make personal remarks about others or impugn their motives. You may not cheer or jeer points made by members of the public. All questions must be addressed to the chair. If you do ask a question, you do not lose the floor, and the answer is not counted as part of your speaking time. So tonight, Kathy and I will be co-chairing the meeting. So just look at either of us, and we'll try to get to any questions that might be. Everyone get the handout? So here's the top summary of the handout. The town's forecasted revenue for fiscal year 2024, which starts July 1st, will not support a level-funded municipal budget, nor a large increase in the Dudley Charlton Regional School District assessment. So in preparation for a multi-million-dollar shortfall, each town department was tasked with preparing a fiscal year 24 operating budget with a 10% cost reduction from this present fiscal year. Those cuts were presented to the Board of Selectmen on February 27th. Shifts were made to the townwide 10% reductions to avoid the layoff of 2 police officers, retain funding for firefighter services and cancer screenings, and provide minimal fleet maintenance. Those shifts included 3 administrative staff members in the police department, treasurer collectors, and assessors' offices are to be laid off 6 months into the fiscal year. Eliminate Thursday night town hall hours and close town hall to the public at least 1 day per work week to allow departments with reduced staff to perform administrative work. State funded earmark for demolishing the Brandon Road Mill Race Bridge is to be shifted to the highway department to fund road maintenance materials. The Board of Health funding is to be cut, thereby reducing health agent services. Reductions to all department expenses, including supplies, vehicle maintenance, and repairs. The cuts listed on the reverse side were proposed by department heads on February 27th and remain in the plan to reduce the town's operating budget in the event of unsuccessful Prop 2.5 override election on April 27th. Without the override, the fiscal year 23 budget of $22,060,598 will be reduced to $20,971,044 for fiscal year 2024. This $1,089,554 reduction will be made with the stated operational budget cuts of $534,305 from the town's savings account, known as stabilization. $166,000 of town's remaining American Rescue Plan Act funding and $17,050 of free cash, which is unspent money from the prior fiscal year. The requested $4,846,597 of Proposition 2.5 override seeks $1,674,514 for town operations. The override will eliminate the need to drain all town financial resources and cut the town operating budget to a point where the town can no longer apply for certain types of grant funding, adequately repair its roadways, replace key employees who are nearing retirement, provide proper health services, adequately fund public safety, address mandatory regulatory compliance testing, fully fund road materials for road repairs and cover any additional needs or services brought about by unforeseen circumstances. The balance, or $3,172,083 of the override, will fund a 12.29% increase of $1,237,925 in the Dudley Charlton Regional School District assessment, for a total fiscal year 2024 assessment of $13,208,391. It also covers Dudley's portion of a feasibility study to renovate Shepherd Hill Regional High School, which is roughly $463,000. Funds $1,437,000 for Dudley Middle School roof replacement, and places the remainder in a school stabilization fund to ensure Dudley's ability to meet projected school assessments through fiscal year 2028. This override would add $3.34 to the tax rate for a new rate of $13.50 per thousand. The average single-family home of $360,942 would see an annual tax increase of $1,205,000. Wow.
Why we didn't have the clerk do this.
Good evening, everybody. Can you hear me in the back? Yes. Okay.
A little bit better.
Okay. Better?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. My name is Kathleen Carboniati, and I'm the chair of the school committee. I just want to first say thank you so much for taking your time to be here tonight. Whether you are for the override or not, we appreciate that you're here to talk about it. That's important. We want to just let you know where we are as a school district. If this is an unfavorable vote, it really will fundamentally change the student experience and opportunities for our Dudley Charlton school children. We would need to reduce our operating expenses by $2,765,000. And that is due to the fact that we share costs between Dudley and Charlton. So if we cut in Dudley, they also have to cut in Charlton as well, just to understand that. As I go through this, if I say any jargon, like education jargon that you don't understand, just let me know and I can explain it a little bit better. We would have to reduce 31.4 full-time equivalent staff members in the district. That would mean possibly 8 teachers from Shepherd Hill, 7 from the middle schools. We'd have to look at cutting athletics in the middle schools, foreign language, and then probably about 8 teachers overall in the elementary schools, the library assistants as well. Our district office staff, we'd have to cut 3.4 positions there, including our assistant superintendent. We'd also have to cut about 5 special education staff. There's also another $580,000 that we'd have to cut, and honestly, we're just at that point of where do we go if we have to cut? With this cut, we'd have to do these cuts as well. It could be anything from increasing class sizes from 25 to 27 students, eliminating Shepherd Regional High School and middle school non-athletics, maybe music, student activity stipends, and reductions to music or interscholastic athletics for all the schools. We as a committee felt, just so you know, we felt that changing it to we had the option of looking at half-day kindergarten, and whether we make it go from a full-time to a half-time, and we felt that that was a non-starter because of equity issues. We felt that every child in our district deserves to go to kindergarten and get a good start in education wherever we are. So that's just some of what we've done. And just so you understand where the increase in cost came for us, if you haven't been listening, we went out to bid on a new bus contract, and initially we got, $500,000 in increases. We rejected those bids. It was kind of a move we weren't sure of. We've never done that before, but we rejected them because we wanted to make sure we came in as low as, as fiscally responsible as we could, and we were able to get them down to about $400,000, and that's for our in-district students. they are able to be placed outside of the district, and the state has determined that they could increase those outside costs by 14%, which is unheard of. So just another unfunded mandate that we have got to pay. So that's kind of where that came from too. And we really don't, that is a mandated thing from the state, so we don't really have much control on that. I'm going to hand it back.
So at this time, is there any questions on any of the information that's either been presented over the last few weeks on any of the previous many meetings, or the previous listening session, or any of the materials that you've seen either in the official town information or what we talked about earlier? Sir, can you come up to the mic? You could introduce yourself and ask us a question.
Is it on? My name is Jim Martin. Where else? Address?
Yeah.
18 Cardinal Drive, Dudley. A question for Kathy. Could you re-explain that transportation thing you just said went down to 400?
Sure.
Because in here it's still at 550.
Where is that?
It's in the handout on the last page.
Oh, yes, sure, absolutely, thank you. I did not mention, so the students that are placed out of district have to also be transported. So that cost is in there as well. So that adds up to the 550.
It's still 550.
Yeah, so it would have been probably 650. Much higher.
So the special education services.
Yeah, you could, you might, can you introduce yourself?
Sure. Jamie Terry, I'm from Charlton, but I'm the vice chair of the school committee. Jamie Terry, I'm from Charlton, but I'm the vice chair of the school committee. So the special education busing costs are $150,000. And so we were able to get the public transportation costs down to $400,000, but that we still need to pay for those special education services for the busing, which would be $150,000 in addition. That's why you see that $550,000. But it would have been higher had we not gone back out to bid for the buses.
So that's not part of the tuition.
No.
Correct. Out-of-town tuition is what we pay to a different school that can serve that student that needs an out-of-district placement.
How many students go out of district?
Can you come up to the mic, sir, for the last question, please?
How many students do we send out of district?
Thank you for the question. My name is Stephen Lamar, superintendent from Dudley Charlton Regional School District. The total number of students that is represented by out-of-district placement. Now, keep in mind again, these are students with significant disabilities that live in our towns that we are unable to educate and provide a free and appropriate public education within Dudley Charlton Regional School Districts. There were a total of 31 students, but it represents a total budget of $3.6 million with a $655,000 increase. Keep in mind that the increase for transportation of to 550 is because both of those contracts went out to bid this year, and the 150 represents an increase in that contract as well for specialized transportation. So you can call it a perfect storm of transportation bids this particular year, and why it's 550. The $655,000 increase again, the Office of Service, the Operational Services Division of the state of Massachusetts permitted an increase of 14% on those tuitions of those 31 students. That's why it's a sizable increase of $655,000. We're not typically used to that type of an increase. So it's an automatic 400 on the 14%, never mind other needs of our students. Again, students with significant disabilities and significant needs.
You had a question? Yes. Yes. Sorry. Thank you.
My name is Cecile Bernier, and I live on Hickory Drive. and lay off for 6 months. Why? I mean, why not cut the position to half-time and have it, it doesn't make sense to me just from a common sense approach. Can someone explain to me why you would do that and lay them off for 6 months? Because then your expenses for paying unemployment are going to go up. So does that make sense to, somebody help me understand it? That's the question. Thank you.
Thank you for the question, John Ray, the town administrator. We agree with you, and we've left that 6-month benchmark at the discretion of the department heads. If they wanted to go part-time, if they thought that would support the operation better, they can do that. It's just it's cutting the salary in half, is basically what it is. Any employee that's scheduled for 20 hours or more, working a certain amount of time, hours total over the course of the year, is eligible to continue to collect benefits, so there's no savings there. That's the state law. 20 hours, right, Rich? 20 hours.
Questions, sir? Come on down.
Mike Peterson, 9 Patrick Street, Dudley. My question to you is, why can't the Dudley Middle School's roof be a debt exclusion? It's separate from the Prop 2.5 override. Do you think that could be a possibility?
Oh, I got this one? I got this one.
I can share. No.
Good evening again, Stephen Lamar, Superintendent for the Dudley Charlton Regional School District. Part of it was a balance between the large deficit that we're facing in our operating budget as well as the roof at the same time. So it was very difficult to discern support for either or for both, so they are combined at this point in time. But the model in combination is to provide an educational stabilization fund controlled by the town for future years of assessments that the town would vote to either apply towards the district assessment or not in those future fiscal years, spreading out the capital in that override out to 5 years or longer.
One other question for the selectmen. I understand Dudley, did you already go through reevaluation of all the properties in Dudley? Are you reevaluating each property for what it's worth? Is that going to be included in the Prop 2.5 override? It's new appraisal fee of each property in Dudley. Assessment of property. When you go around and you revalue new properties.
Anyone from the assessors here? It's my understanding that's an annual process. Rich?
Maybe. Good evening, Rich Carmignani, Treasurer Collector, 49 Airport Road. So there's a few things going on. There's a cyclical inspection, which takes place every year. It's the assessors going into my home to make sure of that. There's 2 bathrooms and not 3. Whatever's been done, the grade, what have you. When they do a reval, what you're doing is marking to market. Your home as of 5 years ago has a different market as of today. The assessor is going through and saying, what is a comparable home to where you live? And the idea is to get a correct market value, less, call it 5%. It's the discretion of the assessors to market, so that when the field card is pulled, you may say, Rich Carmignani's house is X, and they can move from there. The separate part of the conversation is the levy limit. So if we go through and calculate the levy limit, it is the equalized valuation times the tax rate. And you back into what can be levied for taxes the next year. Year 1, new growth 2.5, and that's your levy limit. what your house is worth this year or last year is secondary. The town may only levy to that next step. This is why you have a proposition 2.5. They've identified costs that have moved forward, outpacing 2.5, and they're hoping to increase the levy limit. Whether your home is 200,000 or this time 300,000, the tax rate would go down in the same ratio and proportion. So you're not going to have your home go from 200,000 to 300,000 and pay that much more, 50% more in taxes. It's the levy that's moving. Does everybody understand that?
No.
Okay. All right.
I think they just want to be clear that if their house values go up, does the amount of taxes that they're gonna have to pay go up with it?
Yes.
That's what they want.
Good.
And a new evaluation.
And what the.
Right. I get into too much detail on that. Going back to, the town raised $14 million last year in taxes. Without any change, it's gonna go up by that 2.5 plus the new growth. The equalized valuation probably will go up significantly, which means ratio and proportion moves the tax rate down. So if your house is above the average, your taxes are going to go up a little bit more. If your home is below average or haven't appreciated enough, it's going to go slightly down. So they're just making sure that the values are correct. So that's still not expecting it?
Explain how, when the value of all the properties in that goes up, the tax rate has to go.
We can be quiet for just a minute. Yeah, she's just helping them understand what you explained to them.
Tax rate goes down so that the difference does not exceed.
Right, okay, thank you. Getting a prompt. So back to the levy, we have the equalized valuation, we have the tax rate, and that's what's going to be levied in that year. The idea that the equalized valuation, or in aggregate, all of the home values have increased, the tax rate is going to shrink. So when you hear things like, your tax rate is going to go up $3.30, it's almost a misnomer, because you don't know what the equalized valuation for the next year is. So when the values of the homes are increasing, your tax rate is going to be decreasing. Okay. My apologies for getting a little too deep into the weeds. Is there a follow-up question on that?
I have one other question. We're considered to be equal almost like to Oxford with their tax base. So it's kind of unfair to Dudley because we don't have the industry like Oxford has. And I understand the selectmen have challenges and everybody in this town has challenges because you're working on a limited budget with limited money coming in. So I wanted to congratulate you on that. It's not an easy task. So it's not an easy situation that we're in. I think that's all I have. Thank you very much.
There's a gentleman with salmon shirt. And then there was a gentleman over here, and then the one.
Good evening. My name's Andy Pelletier. I live at 23 Prospect Ave in Dudley, Mass. I'd like to make a point and ask a question, or reiterate a question, that I wasn't quite satisfied with the answer. The first thing I want to do is make a comment. You said the bus bids went up 14% and you weren't willing to accept that?
No, it wasn't the bus bids that went up 14%. The amount of out of district tuition for our special ed students could go up by 14%. we had to go out to bid this year for our buses, and that increased by $500,000.
What was it before?
$500,000 less.
I
don't think we heard. Sorry.
What was the percentage that was?
The percentage of the contract went up about 7.
Yeah.
Good evening. My name is Rich Matthew. I'm the Director of Finance and Operations for the Dudley Charlton Regional School District, and I live at Jonathan Pass in Dudley. So the bus bids increased by about 17%. They went from roughly $2.5 million to around $3 million ultimately. The first round of bids that we received back included roughly a $550,000 increase. At that point, we were going to certainly have to cut a bus. By going back out to bid, we avoided making that reduction, at least at this stage. But again, the total transportation increased by $400,000 for the big yellow buses that you'll see around town, plus the van pool special education vans that you'll see sporadically throughout town and at the schools.
So basically the bid went up 17% and the town is asking us to increase our taxes by 33%.
Right. Good point.
Just making the point. I also want to reiterate the question of the previous gentleman. The feasibility assessment of Shepherd Hill is a finite dollar. Why are we making that a forever tax, not a debt exclusion? The roof on the middle school, a finite dollar. Why is that a tax forever and not a debt exclusion? I believe we just bought a fire truck on a 2.5 override. We're going to be paying for that forever, not until it's paid off, forever, because it should have been a tax exclusion. It was a 2.5 override. And if this Shepherd Hill feasibility study says we need to expand Shepherd Hill, are we going to be looking for a 2.5 override on that, or a debt exclusion on that? And I guess I have to ask, when the roof to the middle school goes bad again, because the middle school is only 25 years old, 20 years old. So in 20 years, when the loan on this roof could be maturing and we could be eliminated the debt exclusion in preparation for another one, we will instead be continuing to pay a tax because it's a 2.5 override rather than voting on another debt exclusion. I just don't understand why we can't separate the ongoing expenses as 2.5 overrides from the debt exclusion and make it 2 votes. Finite dollars should be debt exclusions.
Please, answering after, someone else makes a comment, jeers, or all that. We're trying to get a thoughtful, respectful answering question session. Please, thank you.
I'm not sure if you can just explain to me why we're not doing this in 2 steps.
Once again, I'll try to, Stephen Lamar, Superintendent, I'll try my best to explain it from the school's perspective. Keep in mind that what you're asking for is a menu for the ballot. So you're putting the operational needs where we have to cut $2.7 million out of our budget if it was unsuccessful against the roof needs. So we were looking at a long-term plan that has integrity to it for you as a community. So that's why the money is built into this override. So it's one question for the override, and it will last several 5 to 6 years. There are 2 things that we don't want to do. One is we don't want to get to a point where we start reducing because we don't have the operational funds. So that's why we're requesting an educational stabilization fund, once again controlled by you as a town, not by the school system, in support of that. So what you're asking for is a menu of questions that would be possibility of failures for the school system on both operating and the roof at the same time. The feasibility, I completely understand. And then the last piece is, with the override, the way it is set up, is $1.4 million of the bill for the roof is paid in the first year with this override, to bring down the cost of that roof in the first year. And again, with the stabilization, that's town controlled as to what it looks like towards the school system and the assessment for the community, and the assessment for our district.
Hello, Kathy Hurst from Camelot Circle. It's at the point of what you said is about how that money, once the roof is paid for, still stays on the school budget side. So the roof is paid for, say, in the first year, the money doesn't stay on the school budget side? That's what I was told before.
So the money after the first year will be deposited into an educational stabilization account, which is controlled, any withdrawals from that stabilization account is controlled by the voters at town meeting, requiring a 2/3 majority to withdraw it and apply it elsewhere. The stabilization account is set up so that in year 4 and 5 of this and beyond, we don't have to ask for additional money through the tax override. It'll be there to offset the increased cost of assessment in year 4 and beyond year 5.
So you won't have to increase monies for the school by this
Oh,
education.
We'll have to increase monies by the school, but we'll increase them, we won't ask for another override.
Right, because you've already included this, so this
Because we're
is
saving
like
money.
paying ahead for any future school
That's right.
expenses. Well, that's the problem, because, if it were a debt exclusion, as someone else said, that it would go away. If it was a debt exclusion, once the budget's paid for, it's done. I don't know, by adding this extra money on the school side, it stays forever, so you'll always have that extra, I don't wanna use the word, but it's like an extra kitty or an extra padded budget so that you have that money in years 3, 4, 5, whatever.
You're right, if you debt excluded, it will go away. The problem is that the cost to operate the school district will not go away. That will always increase year by year beyond that 2.5%. So if we save it now, the first year we would put I think it's 1.9, Rich? 1.9, including the capital assessment, would go into the roof and the feasibility study. Year 2, it would be a 2.5% increase on top of the school's assessment, which is normal, which, as you know, is as much money as we can possibly raise on the Prop 2.5 law, plus an additional $750,000 known projected budget in year 2 for the district. The balance of that, between a 1.9 to 2.5 increase and the 750, goes into the stabilization account. We do the same thing in year 3, 2.5% increase over the previous year, $750,000 additional onto the assessment to take care of things like bus contracts and so forth. All projected into the budget, and the balance again goes into educational stabilization. It's year 4 and 5 where the assessment, if we didn't save the money, we'd be back asking for another Prop 2.5 override, as opposed to offsetting the cost of the assessment in year 4 and 5 with the savings in the education stabilization account. I know it's a lot to swallow.
But the Prop 2.5 override will put, after the roof, say the first year, every year after that, the Prop 2.5 vote that's taking place now will pay for the, what did you call the funding, the stabilization fund
It
for
will
the
go into
school?
the stabilization fund for the schools, controlled entirely by the people in this room are registered to vote. It will require a 2/3 majority of town meeting to apply that to the school assessment to offset the increased cost of assessment beyond what we can levy in taxes. 2.5% is the maximum. When you have cost increases that are beyond 2.5%, which everyone in this room, in their own personal budgets, myself included, has been faced with, we've got to figure out a way so that we don't have to keep coming back to the hill and asking our friends and neighbors for additional money every year. This is one way to do it, is to bank it, use it all in the first year, get rid of the feasibility study, take care of the roof, and then bank it in years 2 and 3. Years 4 and 5, we take it out, and we offset the cost of the assessment that's gone beyond 2.5%. And use that money so that we don't have to come back and do this again.
May I ask who decided to forego the debt exclusion path versus to do the Prop 2.5? you said the school committee decided that, they wanted it that way?
Well, through a series of a lot of meetings, everyone pretty much worked out a plan that would not require coming back in the two and third and asking for more money. We wanted one question, a yes or a no, and move it forward through your term.
Well, I see what happened, let's see. So this extra money will just remain on as a school safeguard in future years.
Well, it's not a safeguard, it's a known cost. There's no chance that if it didn't go this way, we won't be back here.
So what would happen if the roof was taken care of as a debt exclusion, and then the rest of the budget went through Prop 2.5?
We could try that too.
Okay, so that
But we
would,
would be back in 2 years.
all right.
Can I just answer one thing for you? I just want to make sure you understand, like, so say it was only for, to provide our budget for this year, which is a level service budget. You know, there's no guarantee in the next year, you know, we are basically educating our children, you know, with their basic needs that we can do. There's no frills, there's no, like, our students, there's no extras. And we have cut our budget very lean. I just want to make sure you understand that. And it's, from what I understood, and correct me if I'm wrong, the stabilization fund is there to offset any increases that we may have in the future, so that it doesn't, it won't affect the town.
Was there anything in the stabilization fund to help with this dilemma?
We don't have a stabilization fund in the town right now.
As far as roof repairs too, is there any kind of fund in the school system that projects what would be needed in future repairs and costs that would have provided for the roof repair rather than asking for it now?
We have this answer, and then we're gonna have, make sure there's no other questions.
I'll have to come back to the podium then again.
How many more do you have?
Huh? I don't have much more of a
Okay.
question, just more of a
We'll
statement.
come right back.
So, no, the school district does not have its own stabilization account. The school district actually invests close to $2 million of its own funds into the operating budget each and every year. Roughly $1.1 million from our excess and efficiency fund, and that's equivalent to the town free cash. That's the remaining balances from previous year operations. The second source of revenue that we use to offset our school budget is through school choice. I've been in the district for 8 years now. This is the 8th budget that I've prepared for the district. And the guideline historically has been Dudley can afford a 2.5% increase to its assessment. When a quarter of your revenue goes up by 2.5%, and the state kicks in roughly $100,000 to $200,000, which has been the average the last few years, at least in Chapter 70. Regional transportation is variable. It is supposed to be at 100%. The state has provided 100% one time in the 50 years of Dudley Charlton. The shortfall in revenue, okay, because the school budget cannot increase by simply 1% or 2% each and every year. There are years where we can make that happen, and we have, but virtually every year in my memory of doing budgets here, we've had some level of reductions. And if they haven't been pure reductions in terms of cost saving, they've been positions that weren't filled, that were open due to retirement or resignations. And it's those sorts of pressures that have put the school in the place where it's at, where we're among, and have been historically, among the lowest spending in the state, when you look at academic regionals. That is challenging in good times, but when you're looking at the level of increases that we have for the upcoming year, which are extraordinary, between the bus contract, the out-of-district tuitions, and utilities alone, you're looking at well over $1.5 million of the $3.6 million increase. Now, in terms of the debt exclusion for the roofs, that would be the path that is normally done. You're absolutely right. Okay, but the conversation this year was how can we, inside of a single Prop 2.5 override question, combine for the town and the school for operating expenses for FY '24, also include future funding, okay? And that is the reason that the capital piece is there. As Mr. Reuter explained, you know, the intention is to create an educational stabilization fund for the Dudley Charlton Regional Schools. And going forward, after fiscal '24, funds will be deposited into that stabilization account, but it will allow the school district's budget to grow at greater than the 1.25 type percent that is dictated by the constraint of only a 2.5% increase to the Dudley assessment. And, you know, that's really the key reason, and the only reason that the roofs have not gone through a debt exclusion yet. All right, it is absolutely unique, okay? We're not the only people or the only community in the state that has taken this approach. But given the constraints and the rules around Prop 2.5 and what you can do and cannot do, if there was the ability to have future years, fiscal '25, fiscal '26, fiscal '27, fiscal '28, included in the one question, I think that may have been the approach that we've taken, but that's not allowed under Mass General Law in, you know, by the Department of Revenue for Prop 2.5 questions. So the decision was made that, you know, if indeed we need to look at future funding, we have to have something that increases the levy limit, and then we have to come up with a good, solid plan to use those monies wisely in the future. And by having a stabilization account, it allows for a level tax rate, and it hopefully will buy the town many years, you know, 4 or 5 years of economic development to increase its tax base, so that we're not going back to the citizens each and every year. And if ultimately it comes down to the fact that we're okay with getting the increase for FY '24, but we need to come back and, you know, look at an override for FY '25 if the needs are that way, then, you know, that's up to the taxpayers.
Okay, so you confirmed that it was for future funding as well?
Yes, absolutely, absolutely.
All right, I just, I can understand how a lot of this has to do with inflation. Each one of us sitting here, see if you have heating oil, it's gone up 40%. Electric bill, ours went up over 90%. Last year, this month was 293. This month it was 555. So I know that you're feeling that too, as well as everyone knows that gasoline costs have doubled. My last thing I just wanted to say was, I'm just going to read these few paragraphs here because it was supposed to be in the Webster Times last week, but didn't make it. It's going in this week, and perhaps I could just tell you what I was going to talk about, because they highlighted the front page of the publication of the Webster Times and about the proposition override to the voters in the special election on April 25th, 2023. And from what we've talked about with anyone that we've come across, it had come to my attention that many people are confused about the difference between a debt exclusion and a Prop 2.5 override. And as stated by Division of Local Services on the Mass Gov site, debt exclusions and overrides enable a community to increase its levy limit either temporarily or permanently. A debt exclusion is a temporary increase until a project is paid for. A Proposition 2.5 override is permanent. In this specific instance, the voters of Dudley will decide whether or not to increase their property taxes by 33%. This is a permanent increase. In the Webster Times article provided by the town's information, and as you said earlier tonight, that the average single-family home valued at $360,942 would be an increase of $1,205. I just looked at properties in our neighborhood, and the lowest one was closer to $1,450, all the way up to over $2,100 increase. So in order to avoid confusion, it needs to be stated that this is not a one-year or temporary increase if a Proposition 2.5 override is permanent. Dudley voters should also know how this relates to their own personal situation, their own values of their house, and as it was said before, I just got, as mostly everybody did, there is a new assessment going to be held soon, and I know that people will have to understand that too. I have a chart, I'm not going to belabor the whole thing, but if you have a house at $400,000, it's a $1,300.
Can I just ask, I just want to make sure we get everyone.
I'm just going to say two more things.
Thank you.
If you have a house at $500,000, you're seeing $1,700 increase approximately. If you have a house at $700,000, $2,300 plus. So everybody has to look at it. It's not just a $1,200 increase for 1 year. These increases that could be $1,000, $2,000 or more will go on and stay within your taxes permanently. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Hello, my name is Adam Werbeck, 133 Klondike Road, Dudley, Mass. I just have curiosity questions. You guys are talking about how many special needs kids you guys are moving to different districts. My question is how many regular kids are coming from different districts, which they are, but I'm just curious about the number. So we're sponsoring technically somebody else's?
Again, Stephen Marsh, to be clear, those districts, those students that are tuitioned out of our district are not necessarily going to other public schools. They're going to very private, specialized schools that have sometimes 3 or 4 staff members per student because of the significant needs of those individuals. We do take in 164 school choice students into our district.
Why do we do that?
The school choice is an annual vote by the school committee to permit students of school choice to come into our district. At this point in time, it is an offset for our budget. As Mr. Matthew had mentioned, it provides $1 million. So if we were able to gain an extra $1 million in revenue, maybe the school committee would choose not to permit school choice students to come in at this point in time.
Thank you. My second question is, you guys mentioned, English is my second language, so I must misunderstood. Somebody said that people that are working 20 hours, they still get the benefits. How does that work? In any normal commercial, you need to be 30 hours in order to be full-time. So if you sponsor benefits up to 20, that's an issue.
Good evening. It would be, we'll just speak to the law. 32B allows the town to pay health insurance. The threshold is 20 hours over your look-back period. You start to mention look-back period, it's the Affordable Care Act. The town has gone through and designated a period of look-back that says, in this 12-month period, this employee met this threshold. Under Mass General Law, 32B, it's 20 hours. Under the Affordable Care Act, it's 30 hours. That is what the law says as far as health insurance eligibility.
And that's the law as it pertains to municipal employees, correct?
Municipal employees, I believe the Affordable Care Act is everyone, but 32B is specifically for municipal.
Does that explain the difference between commercial and?
But I think still we're picking up the bill. And the last question is, how come you guys don't do split like Worcester? Commercial properties could pay $19 per thousand versus starting to, all the people that own fixed income. I don't know, it's just some of those companies, they own the buildings, they're not going anywhere, and you're not bringing in any more business. just like in your little paperwork, it mentions, we're not located next to Mass Pike, let's face it. So maybe that's something too, those guys are laughing all the way to the bank.
And the point's taken, sir. If you look at the difference, however, with commercial levy and industrial levy in our bordering towns that actually have major routes going through them. For commercial levy, Dudley only has $370,000, but we have a limited business community to begin with. It's always been a discussion when the Board of Selectmen take the assessor's recommendation and set a tax rate, whether it's a single or a split tax rate. Whether or not we want to scare other business away, or we want to, well, I mean, it's a legitimate concern. If you only have $370,000 in commercial levy versus, for example, in Southbridge, 1.9, in Oxford, 2 million, it's a consideration that if you raise taxes on, if you raise the tax rate to the limited amount of commercial business you have, they could certainly leave and go elsewhere.
They own buildings, they won't leave.
And the same with the industrial levy, it's 298 versus neighboring towns that are 2 million, 1.1, 2.4.
Well, just figured I'd bring it up.
I don't think that even if we had a split tax rate, we could rise to the occasion enough with the limited amount of business we have in town to cover this cost.
True. But it would help. Thank you.
Thank you. This one, and I'll help you as the reflector. Yes, you're up.
Hello, my name is Joe Gadori, 17 Mason Road, Dudley, Mass. On the last page of the print of this, thing, I think maybe could be a little bit of clarification. Under ramifications of the unfavorable vote, second bullet point, the grammar is tough there, so maybe you can help me with that. Will establish a clear movement to compliance and what is regulatorily required. So we want to clean it up.
Sure, you can answer that.
Thank you for the question. So there are other examples that are within this particular sheet here that describe that. So for example, athletics is not regulatory required. It's for a well-rounded experience.
Regulatorily required in the school.
In the schools, correct.
Okay.
That whole last, I'm sorry, sir, that whole last page is for the schools.
Oh, go
That's
ahead.
all for the schools. So the schools would move to compliance and regulatory required experience for our students.
Okay. Thanks. That didn't jump out at me, so thanks for that. Appreciate it.
And sir, in the back there on deck.
Hi, Robin Watson, 228 Dresser Hill Road. I spoke at the last meeting that we also had. One question and then one comment, well, maybe two comments. Do you invest the money that's in the stabilization funds, or do you just leave it sit there earning no interest?
It's a trust fund. It can be sectioned off. It will earn its own interest, and the interest will stay with the account.
Is it a good interest? Or is it like 1%? There's a difference between bank interest and investing, or a CD, or something that's gonna generate a little bit more than nothing.
Right. And I'm the treasurer, so my guys will stand in the event they ever report a loss or anything, 4.5% or 7, something like that. It's a fixed income, security, what have you. We're not buying junk bonds, we're not going through trying to time stocks. This is similar advisor to neighboring towns, so better interest rate.
Thank you. One more comment. Rather than doing one vote as a Prop 2.5 override, I would like to see 2 votes. One for debt exclusion that includes that roof repair. Maybe remove the Shepherd Hill feasibility study for this year and have the Prop 2.5 override as a second vote. Is it too late to do that?
I want to clarify something about the feasibility study, thank you. The feasibility study, if we delay the feasibility study, we will forfeit our ability to enter that program. So, of reimbursement. So, for us, we need to do the feasibility study this year. But as your other question, I will let them answer that.
So the other question was, can you separate debt exclusion and Prop 2.5 override at this point in time and have 2 votes?
I don't believe for this, not for this vote. If something else happened, there is that opportunity, but not for this vote.
Okay. And my one last point.
And, sorry, just and one other thing, I keep hearing about debt exclusion or Prop 2.5 for the fire truck. The fire truck was a debt exclusion.
Right. And my one last point for everyone in here is that everyone hears Prop 2.5 override and they think, oh, not 2.5%, it's just going to go up a little bit. Do the math. It's 30%. 30% permanent increase on your current taxes. Thank you.
So you're coming forward.
Jerry Frank, 13 Causeway Road in Dudley. I just have some questions here. On the last page at the bottom, are those numbers are the amount of the increases, right? They're not the cost of, it's not the overall cost. Like the buses don't cost $550,000. They're going to be increased by $550,000. So then on the out-of-district tuition, that's $655,000. Does that represent a 14% increase on a number that's like about $4 million or something? Roughly, real roughly. But that's what that represents, right? So, and that 655 is what the state is allowing the increase to be. But that doesn't mean the increase will be that much, right? We don't know what the increase is going to be.
So the Operational Services Division of the state permitted this in the fall, and every single one of them are going to 14% increase.
Okay, thank you.
My name is Brett, and I live on Mason Road. I noticed recently, in like the past year, there's a sidewalk getting built, and just like I'm kind of dumb, so I'm gonna like kind of go like question the question. Did we vote on that? I moved here recently, so I'm not too sure.
The Mason Road sidewalk?
Yes.
That was grant funded, so there was no vote on it.
There was no vote on it?
Correct.
Okay, I was just wondering.
Sir, the Boston sweater.
Scott Skowski, 8 Catherine Street. I took the time to write a whole bunch of notes, but I wasn't over it anymore. But there were just a couple of things that were commented. I know one thing that was said, by your financial director, that the school invests its own money. Check me if I'm wrong, but isn't that basically the town? The school doesn't have its own money, or shouldn't. But in any case, I live at 8 Catherine Street. One of the previous speakers was a...
Mr. Zakowski, do you want us to address that now, or?
Well, I mean...
Well, why don't we address that now?
It's just, I think it's a poor use of words.
Yeah, no, we want to clarify that for you.
I agree. I think the word reinvesting or investing, anything in our excess and deficiency fund is, you know, this form is in fiscal planning, that's probably the way it should be looked at. So the way the system is set up, our fiscal budget is set up, is we relied on excess and deficiency can be built up to 5% of your total budget in a regional school district. Dudley Charlton Regional School District has never even come close to 5% of excess and deficiency. And there are other regional school districts, including Bay Path and Charlton, that hits 5% every year on their excess and deficiency fund. We don't. And part of the reason why we don't is because it has always been an offset in our operating budget every year. So we scrape, borrow, steal from our lines to try to offset the following fiscal year. But that's a fiscal model that we both inherited here. So in order to stop that, so that we can build up excess and deficiency to pay for a couple of capital improvements in our district, we need an influx of $1 million on top of our assessment to the communities to stop using E&D in that manner. But again, that's the fiscal model that's been in place. And the only way to get away from that is to ask for an additional $1 million on the assessment, so we can no longer do that, and then have support to use the E&D to offset some of that.
Okay, thank you. That did clarify some how I thought of that. But one of the first speakers is my next door neighbor, lives across the street from me. And I'm going to be bluntly honest. I've had to make some hard decisions over the last few years, since pre-COVID. All you have to do is drive by my house, you can see it. My yard is a shithole, sorry. I only have so much money, and I have to spend it on what I spend it on. I'm getting to a point where I can start fixing some of that. To be able to forecast out and have money put aside for 5 years from now, not happening. Not in my lifetime anyways. It's not gonna happen in my household, and I'm sure there are others in town that are the same way. We have to make hard decisions every year. My taxes will go up $1,000 a year. Permanent. Part of that is 400-some-odd thousand, combined with Charlton, that's about $1 million for a feasibility study for upgrading or replacing Shepherd Hill. Replacing, I don't even want to think about that number. But the next town over just had, I think they had to go three or four times before they finally pushed it through. They're getting about a 30% increase in their property taxes to pay for, or they're paying a significant number more of property tax. I don't know the exact percent. To remodel their high school. Is that coming in a couple of years? I know there are other projects this town has coming down the pipe that are going to cost some significant money. They're going to have to be debt excluded. Where is that money going to come from? It's going to be another vote. I find it more palatable, more responsible, more realistic to be able to agendize, to set some priorities, vote for what we can. I understand, I know I'm part of the municipal government. We've worked hard to keep our budget as low as we can on the water and sewer department. We just had to raise rates. But there, it needs to be, I know we need an override. We need an override to get our budget into into a healthier location, healthier situation. However, adding capital projects into that just isn't the right way to do it. To me, give us an override, give us a couple of debt exclusions, we can figure out what fits, what doesn't in our budgets, and we can make informed decisions. With it all piled in at one, it makes it really difficult for a whole lot of people. I mean, that's not really a question, but it's just, what I have written down is a lot more hardline, but I mean, let's be realistic here. I think a good majority of the folks that are here today are here because they're looking at significant increases in their property tax and their electricity and their their other services, electricity, gasoline. Water, sewer. Yeah, it's there. I mean, I don't want to get into the water sewer stuff, but we're looking at spending millions of dollars.
You can't drink it.
Yeah, you can't drink it.
I believe there was there a woman, David
Afternoon, Jason Beast, Clean Circle. In a former life, I was on the Oxford School Committee, so I'm extremely familiar with what's going on. So, I tried to get away and lower my blood pressure. So. Couple questions. Were there any surveys done of the outcomes of 2.5 and debt exclusions, or was this just a conversation amongst friends? Did we look at the results of other towns that have split it that way and what the outcomes were there? Because other towns have done the same thing where it's been a split.
So the question was any polls done? I don't believe that's, no polls were done. No polls were done.
So I would take that as a learning opportunity for future votes. I think this is in peril. And then secondly, I don't expect you to answer this question, but when it comes to a stabilization account that you have, let's say it piles up to a certain amount of money. I don't expect it to get into $10 million. I expect it to be mostly spent, but that has to be voted on an annual basis in town meeting, right? So you've got the stabilization account, which is public. You've got teachers' unions, which are looking at the stabilization account. So if I'm in the teachers' union and I'm watching Dudley's got a lot of money for the schools, think through how you're going to address that when it comes when they're asking for 6, 6, and 6 on their next contract. Again, I don't expect you to answer that question, but think through the strategy.
Can I make a comment and then I'll test you? I do just want to tell you that our teachers are one of the lowest paid teachers unions in the state, and we were very lucky with them that they were very gracious in our past contract negotiations and fair. They have never looked at those types of things.
Understood. I'm just saying, watch that as a consideration going forward, because there's now, if this becomes, there is now a pot, and that will become a negotiating point. And I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Stephen Marsh, Superintendent, I agree. I appreciate your comments, but I agree with Chair Kamiani. The teachers union, keep in mind that the Dudley Charlton Regional School District is the larger employer between the towns of Dudley and Charlton, and they've had an incredible working relationship with their communities as residents of their communities. And again, the stabilization fund would be controlled towards assessments, not towards contractual obligations. And we've had very successful negotiations with all of our associations in the district, and very reasonable and fair negotiations.
Yes. Mr. Peterson.
Mike Peterson, 9 Catherine Street, Dudley. I have a couple of questions for the selectmen. I understand the French River Bridge has been out for quite some time. I've seen in the papers that it went out for bid for demolition. Now you talked about something like the highway department having some materials ready, whatever. Then I seen another proposal to put a temporary bridge in for like $500,000 or $600,000. And then it might be as high as 10 years out to get a new bridge built. I just want to know how you propose paying for this bridge. Is this included in the Prop 2.5 if there is no override, or is it something different that we're talking about?
Mind if I call on the highway?
Sure.
Okay. Jeff, could you answer that question first, please?
Jeff Murray, the highway superintendent. There is a proposal right now for the replacement of the bridge or funding through this override. There is a plan in place and funding through Chapter 90 for demolition of the bridge. Project Review Committee on a state level has looked at it, and there's a $6,235,000 proposal that their estimated value that would be funded through the majority of it would be funded through National Highway funding, and a portion of it by the state. The work would, design phase, construction phase would happen through the state, and there unfortunately isn't a time frame as far as when that would happen at this time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Frank Ruggiero, Lawrenceburg, Dudley. As I understand it, the town of Charlton voted against seeking an override. And then they decided not to give the school committee the $2.2 million they wanted. Instead, they gave you 1.1 and said, oh, well. How does that affect?
Let me clarify that. We were at a meeting last week with them. The town of Charlton gave us 9 right now. That is what they're going to the town meeting with. At any chance in the town meeting, a member of the town can get up and raise it to 2.2, which is what we would need for the full.
I'm sorry, you said they gave you how much?
1.9 million.
1.9. Well, it's still less than you asked for.
Yes.
And I'm wondering, how does that impact, if they give you less than you asked for, how does that impact what Dudley has to pay?
Right, so 1.9, if it goes forward at a 1.9, that would be roughly 600,000 overall. That would be cut from our budget. So it would be, we're a little bit, I think it's like, we're at 46%?
46.3%.
Okay, we're at 46.3, and they're the other percent. So we have to, like, whatever they cut, yeah, roughly 300,000.
So does that mean the town of Dudley would be able to pay you less?
Yes, fortunately.
And I also have a problem with the stabilization fund. Correct me if I'm oversimplifying, but it seems like you're asking Dudley taxpayers to give you their money so you can put it in an account to earn interest and spend it in the next 4, 5, 6 years pretty much any way you want. What's wrong with just asking them every year or every time you need something to give you the money? Maybe things will change, maybe your needs will change, maybe the economy will change.
Certainly, we will be back. If we are only able to get the amount of money to cover this year's budget, we will be back.
So what's wrong with that?
I think we were trying to look, people have asked us to look forward and forecast, and that's what we were trying to do.
But it seems to me your job is to ask us every time you need something, not to.
Right, and this was something that was worked on between the town and the school district. So it wasn't just, the school committee can't, we voted on what we needed in our budget. We cannot vote to decide how the town is going to, whether it's going to debt exclude or do this or that. That is something that is voted by the selectmen as well. We worked in conjunction with the selectmen.
Okay, thank you.
The gentleman in the middle with the glasses. So while he's going up to the right, we have the woman that was next to him, and then the man in the tan jacket, and I'm sorry that I'm pointing out that way, and then we will move back. Okay?
I'm Mike Piscopo, 100 Charlton Road. I wondered if you could just clarify something you said a few moments ago. We were talking about the renovation study, and you said if we didn't go forward with it, we wouldn't qualify for reimbursement. Are we getting that money back?
So let's.
The Mass School Building Authority has multiple phases to their program. It's a grant program, so the grant will support a partial part or part of that funding, and that's a lagging reimbursement that would come back on a future assessment for the community of Dudley.
How much of it would we be getting back?
That has not been set yet. I'd hate to give you a number, but I will, because because I know that people want it. Let's say between 50 and 60% back on the 463,000.
And where is that money going, into the stabilization fund?
No, that money comes back to the town for future assessments to the town.
But we're being asked to pay for it permanently. That would seem to me to really justify a debt exclusion. It's a temporary expense.
Again, we do understand that concept, yes.
Thank you.
Then, sir, in the tan jacket. And water on.
I know I'm going to be very friendly today. Don't worry about it. My name is Greg Fenatsky. I live on Eagle Drive. I'm the builder. I built for my brother around 80 houses on Eagle Drive, that area. And I know so much about construction, like the bridge. I'm going to find you guys who are going to do it for half the price. I told you, that's great, I'm a funny guy. I come from Poland, from communist Poland, and I see communist system in America now. This is nothing against you guys or another, but it's coming here. Europe is dying, people have no money. They have no money for food. Germany people, they go into garbage to pick up some food. German people. France is burning. And you're talking about millions. How much you pay for buses? 3.5 million? How much buses cost in school? 3 million. I'm gonna bring some limo for those kids. And I'm gonna take whatever it costs, I'm gonna pay it. Limo.
And just so you're aware, because we are a regional school district, we cannot, it's not something where we can go and charge the people who use the buses for the buses. We have, as a regional school district, we have to pay for bus transportation.
Yeah, but this is, somebody is telling you to use those buses, and the bus is used for 2 hours probably, and sitting in the yard. I mean, it's crazy. You're talking millions. How much to fix the roof? You said 2 million? I'm gonna find you guys. They're gonna fix for half a million. You know? I'm gonna find you. I got time. I am smartly that on computer, on YouTube. I am watching stuff. I learn. And I start it's not business, like Dudley Patriots. I just opened PO Box if you guys don't know what that's sign to that idea to help together. And about taxes gonna be crazy. It's 33%. I built a big house, I don't worry, I got some money. But I am worried, I own some apartments in Dudley. I didn't raise rent for them probably for some of them 15 years. Some of them living there for 10 years. They paying me $750 a month, 2-bedroom apartment with garage like condo. How I gonna go to their house, that's 300 more a month? That's what they're gonna tell me. I'm sorry for those the people, they have no money. Electricity, it's electric heat, they're killing them. I don't know what I'm gonna tell them. They have no money to pay me now. And the economy is going to drain. You're thinking about next year, what happened? People taking cash from banks and buying gold and silver. In Maine, you can buy food now with silver bars or silver coin. It's going. And you're talking millions here. Last year I was at a meeting, and you guys approved 10 million, like 10 candy for water department. 10 million was 65 people on the room. Most of them was connection. 10 million. Who's gonna pay that? Water is dirty with chloride. I cannot take my jacuzzi because I smell like chloride guy. I have to bring water from my son's house to drink. After jacuzzi, I have to take
take shower because it stinks like that. It used to be good water in Dudley. Where you were, guys, 20 years ago, I put water line on Eagle Drive, and then you guys put moratorium, no more, because Chojnacki tried to build more houses. This is outrageous what you guys do. And another thing, I'm going to go to heaven, I know, because I am living in hell now over 4 years with some of those girls. I am not joking, this is true. They shut me down for 7 years, selected publicly on TV, said, few more years and Chojnacki is going to go bankrupt, and they did not to say, yeah, let's wait another few years. A few months and they're going to go bankrupt, we're going to take this. I built Eagle Drive, and they're not plowing that road. Why? We're paying taxes on the plowing. I asked them so many years, they're just ignoring us because crazy Polish immigrant or whatever, that they don't know what it is.
Mr. Chojnacki, do you have something germane to?
No, okay, what next was, I got this. That means I'm going to start at Dudley Patriots. Is PO Box 10.
Mr. Chojnacki, what does that have to do with Prop 2.5 discussion?
No, because this is like Bible, Proposition 2.5. You cannot override that. This is like Bible, God's Bible. We fight for years to do that. Years. People spend time. Now you're gonna, in 2019, you override it and to raise taxes 20%. Now it's still it's free, 40%, and you're spending that millions like king. I don't know why you need, somebody must check what you guys do, friends. Not in person.
We have open meetings, we have, we meet every other Monday, and we have town meetings, and we have the people in the room vote, whether it's 65 or 1,000 show up. We ask all town voters to show up, and very few do. So, we put it in front of the people to vote yes or no. We're not forcing anything through.
No, just what
So if it could show up, and you can decide, like right now, everyone's asking these questions, and I appreciate everyone asking these questions, whether your predisposition is to be for or against it. But we're gonna have a vote, and you can decide. So we're trying to provide choices to do that.
Okay, do this, maybe I'm gonna use my way. Let's vote by the names. Anybody who vote to raise the taxes is going to be named, you know which house they live. Let's raise taxes on his side. Why you want to raise on other people?
All right, shall we continue our questions?
Yes, sir, I think yes. Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chojnacki.
Hi, John Swayze, 30 Corbin Road, and I don't know how I'm going to follow that. I had a number of questions. I don't want to monopolize the time, but I had a couple of questions that I thought might be germane. The question of out-of-district placements came up, and I understand that obviously those are very high-need students with very particular needs. However, in the school district where I work, we have had programs instituted, and we've had discussions about expanding those and bringing some of those students in-house. And I understand it's not a quick fix, but especially where I've heard tonight a 14% increase on tuition for sending those students out, as well as increased bus fees, it just makes all the sense in the world to bring them in district. Now, I understand with 31 students, you certainly can't, with the highest needs students where you must have, 2 or 3 people for each student. I'm thinking there must be some proportion of those who could be brought back in, and it would actually make it more financial sense to bring them in. The cost to hire staff and to start a program, and I imagine there must be some space available or can be made available in the high school. Have it stop being a sending district, have people send their students to us. It would actually end up being, called any kind of stabilization fund. you know, to bring those students in. So has that been discussed at all?
Yes, we will.
I greatly appreciate the question. We have done that, but as we've tried to share in our meetings, that if we move more towards compliance and regulatory requirements, we don't have the capacity to build programs. And also through our discussions, because our budget is a level service budget, it's trying to move what we have moving forward, we don't have the finances or the resources to establish, because then what you're talking about requires an investment above and beyond our operating budget to start. We have done that over the past couple of years. We brought a number of students back in, but 31 students, again, very complicated students, requires an initial investment of over $100,000 for staffing, et cetera, for some of those students. We don't have that resource available to start that program.
Would there be no grant funding that might be available on a temporary basis as a way to establish that and prove as a feasible program that could then be made permanent when you start having more students coming back in?
Did I understand that you work for a school district?
I did.
There are no grants for that. That's a requirement. We're required to provide a free and appropriate public education. There are no grants to, you know, we do have a circuit breaker offset for those students, but that's again, a trailing reimbursement for those. These fixed costs are this year right now for FY24. And those needs are right now, and we could have a student move in tomorrow, that could be a couple $100,000 tuition.
That's always a danger, I understand that.
Yep.
But I guess, you know, and again, I'm a teacher, I don't deal with the financial part of it, so whatever is outside my bailiwick.
I wasn't sure what your role was, but there are grants available to start those programs. That's an investment by the local district to start that, so that would require seed money.
I do believe there are places like, say, Donors Choose and other project funding that could be used for that. And again, I'm not suggesting that we try to bring the heaviest need students back, but I imagine among that population there must be something.
Just so you understand, the ones that are out are the heaviest need students. We have, as Superintendent Lamar said, we've worked hard in our district, because that is something that, as the school committee members, we're always looking at, like, what ways can we bring more students back into our school district? And I know, our special education department has really looked at that. So I don't want you to think it's not something we looked at, we have been looking at that.
It's also better for the student to be back in the district,
Yes.
not just the financial aspect, and I know that's why we're all here tonight, but we became members of the school committee for the students, and so that is an aspect that we look at all the time, and our special education director has done a really good job of evaluating this, and 31 is a lot of kids that have high needs, but it's also a small amount when you're talking that we have 3,400 students in our district.
Caitlin Pansick, Dudley C for the school committee. I just want to point out that part of the budget cuts that we will have to face if this override does not pass is targeting tier 2. Our tier 2 tries to prevent students from going to our tier 3, which is our special ed needs for our students. By cutting our resources for the students that we currently have, we are going to push our students either to tier 1 or tier 3. So by cutting our resources, eventually we're going to, what you're saying is make our expenses for out of district possibly even larger. So if we cut today, we're only going to pay for that down the road. Because the students that we are meeting their needs within the district, we might not be able to. And therefore, it becomes an out-of-district placement. So that's what we're trying to prevent. We're trying to prevent future costs rising at this rate by giving the resources these students need.
So just a couple of other questions, I'll try to be brief. As far as looking at doing cost cutting, and again, as we all know, every school budget's biggest expense is personnel. And I'm always loath to have any personnel cut whatsoever. But when it comes down to it, my school district has had to bring in a great number of cuts. We've had to increase athletic fees, have club fees, have reduced bus runs. I noticed you guys have a late bus. We limited that. I know Lester has their club time during the day, so as a way to eliminate a late bus. So I don't know if any of those have been considered. And I guess it's not really my question, but my main question had to do with personnel. Has there been any consideration of staff that has no face-to-face interaction with students? I think one of the things that we have let go are admin or academic coaches who, where we put the focus on just student-facing staff and getting rid of some of the salaries for staff that do not interact with students.
Yeah, thank you for that question. We have, just so you know, over the past couple of years, every time we've needed to cut, that is where we've cut. We've cut our library aides, we've cut different positions. Our district office is the lowest office in the state of Massachusetts for support for our district. And, and still, they're able to, I've been impressed with all the grants that we've actually brought in, considering how many resources we actually have in the district office. So, we're still trying to do things like that. Did I miss?
This is my 4th year as a superintendent, and since I've been here, we've got over $1 million in staff to try to balance our budget. And as Mrs. Carmignani said, and as you're asking, we don't have non-forward-facing staff in our district. We're very lean. Every elementary school is a single principal. All of our regulatory positions for special education, we have 7 schools. We have 5 regulatory positions within our district. Our district office is the leanest one you'll find anywhere around here. Anywhere. There are very few non-forward-facing individuals. The district invests a lot in their classroom in Dudley Charlton, so that's why as we get deeper into reductions, we'd have no choice but to look at class size or other student experiences within the district, because we don't have those other positions to reduce.
So there's no academic coaches, there's no... Okay. This question, my last final question, or one comment, is really, I guess, more for the select board. One of the things I noticed on the very back page, no, I'm sorry, I think that's the second to last, all the boxes. There's something I noticed under the assessor's box on the lower right-hand corner. It mentioned the eliminating public access to online property records. That's a little confusing. My understanding, I go in there a fair bit. Worcester County Registry of Deeds is available online. How would this be something that's going to be cut that doesn't have to be cut?
Was it online property records or the maps?
The third bullet point says eliminate public access to online property records.
Yeah, I know when we did the hearings and had the assessors came up, they mentioned there was some fees that they had to pay for certain online programs that they wouldn't be able to pay for. And specifically which ones, not exactly sure. So I think maps is what.
I think there's an ArcGIS, which is a geo-mapping feature that goes along with the assessor's database that's linked into the building permitting office, for example, and so forth. That enhanced feature and that access online for residents would be good. Okay. And I agree that this registry of deeds is available.
Yeah, it just seems a little not misleading, but just I don't know if it was termed properly. So. And then the only thing I just want to mention as a comment is, it seems as though there's an appetite in this room for looking at, these fixed costs, these finite costs of debt exclusions, and I think the question was asked by another resident, is it too late to do that? No, it's certainly not. Just vote down this override and have another one in the future. That's my last comment. Thank you.
Yes, Richard Reagan, Corbin Road. I've been sitting here listening tonight, and there's been one common thing, and that is the 2.5, override, being 33% and staying there permanently versus segmenting it out into different debt exclusions and take a look at what's needed for the town. I'm sure every one of you up there at that main table has done a lot of work on this and lost a lot of sleep over this over the night and trying to come up with the best way you can to do this. But I think you're asking the population of Dudley that are gonna go out and vote on the 25th, hopefully, all right, to say, okay, let's just give them 33% in a permanent vote. And I think that politically is gonna die. And then you're gonna have a zero-sum game, and you can go right back to the drawing board. So, I don't think anybody's really opposed to attacking the bills and doing what we need to do within limits. Okay, maybe not the limits you like, but within limits. But I think it's a design plan, and I think you have a political problem here as well as a financial problem. And that's all I got to say on the subject, and good luck to you.
I appreciate you letting me come up here a second time. I also appreciate the clarification on the fire truck. Specifically through the conversations, just let me get my understanding. The reason we're not looking for debt exclusion is because after the roof is paid, that money will then be a permanent addition in the stabilization fund, which I think is actually really good forward thinking by this council and by the school committee. I appreciate you working together on this. My question on this, I'll simplify it. If we did a 2.5 override to hire a police officer, we're obligated to hire the police officer the first year. Can we light him off the second year? Is 2.5 override money obligated to the cause that we say it's obligated to forever? This council seems to have good foresight. The school committee seems to have good foresight, but I've been a municipal employee and I've seen some lesser foresighted councils who would say, all this money going into the stabilization fund, can we touch it? I guess my question is, if we vote yes, assuming that this money is gonna forever be going into the stabilization fund to offset these projects so that we don't have to do a 2.5 on exclusion in the future, can a future council say, no, we're gonna change that and move that money away?
So the answer is, the first year is, absolutely has to go to the intended purpose. The purpose of setting up the educational stabilization account is to get it out of our hands and put it back into town meeting's hands. You set up that account and you make the deposit. The town meeting keeps, no matter who's in these chairs in 5 years or 3 years, keeps everyone honest. It requires a 2/3 majority vote to take that money out and allocate it elsewhere after year 2. And I, for one, am not going to be in a position anytime after this, within the next 5 years, where I'm going to advocate, other than what the plan is presented here tonight.
My understanding of the vote is that the money is allocated to fix the roof. The intent, after the roof is fixed, is to put it in the stabilization fund. That's not part of the motion, is it? The motion is to fix the roof. The plan is monies thereafter will go into the stabilization fund. So once the roof is fixed, this council, unless this exact council is still sitting there, and 5 years from now, this exact council is still sitting there, and they honor their agreement, the vote is to fix the roof. After that, that money can be used for anything, or does it have to go to that stabilization fund?
It can be used for anything. It can be used for anything. But who's still going to be sitting here after year 1 and it goes elsewhere? Who's going to get reelected? If all of us, all the elected officials sit here tonight,
I probably would be out of the job.
I'm not worried about you guys.
No,
I'm
I'm
really
just
letting
saying
you
in
do it.
general, you would have to go out on a limb, because that could happen at any time for any budget line item, either on the school side of the budget or the municipal side of the budget. Any town meeting can come in, any recommendation for any official can be made to cut the police department to $2 for the year. And if that passes by the voters, you just cut your police department by $2. That's always a risk. But you've got all these people sitting up here going out on a limb, saying this is what we intend to do. Hold our feet to the fire. There's no one on this table that can make that unilateral decision to do something else. Only the people in this audience can make that decision. 2/3 majority vote.
I am not impugning anybody on this board. I mean, I've stated that I kind of like your thoughts at least. I may not support this, but I like your thoughts. However, 5 years from next year, I expect it will happen. The year after, I expect it will happen. The year after that, when 3 of the 4 of you are changed, it might happen. 5 or 6 years from now, when all of you are changed, there's no obligation for them to follow this. I appreciate your time.
Get the last couple questions.
Mark McGarrett from Lawrence Road. Has the town ever considered getting payments in lieu of taxes from its major nonprofit institutions? And what's been the result and what's happened with that?
So I'll answer it. The answer is yes. No firm plans, but it's definitely an option that has to be broached.
Do you plan on broaching it soon or not?
Yes.
Good, thank you.
Yes, the gentleman up there, and then we'll.
Jerry Frank from 13 Causeway Road. Could you just comment really quickly on page 2 where it says state aid, why there's such a big difference between Charlton, Dudley, and the other 3 towns on the state aid?
So that overall number for state aid includes a lot of different things. In most cases, the obvious and quick answer and correct answer is that we are not wealthy enough not to need some, but we're not in a lower bracket enough that we get a lot. So when you look at Southbridge, their overall state aid amount is generally more. If you look down towards Charlton, we line up a little bit more closely with Charlton, which is appropriate for the 2 towns in the district. So there's a lot of different qualifying factors, including on the education side and the municipal side. But generally, there's income requirements that make some towns that border us more eligible than others.
Hi, Kelly Bennett, 14 June Street. Just have a quick question so I can understand. Online, you guys posted about how to calculate the property tax, and the assessment is out there with the Vision Property record. So that 2023 assessment, is that the number that I would be using to go forth as to what the increase in my taxes would be?
Yes.
Yes?
Better number, yeah.
I just wanted, what's that?
I said it's a better number.
It's a better number, okay, so that's a good example.
A great place to start.
Okay,
yes.
so do we know when that final number will be out?
the Board of Selectmen will host the assessor who will go through and present the tax classification hearing at some point at the end of October. That'll be the point where the Department of Revenue goes through, validates and verifies the values, and essentially the budget. There is a budget that's going to get passed in May with a lot of assumptions made on it. The validation of that is the official setting of the tax rate. You wouldn't expect it to move too much. Prior to that, you'd want to be able to make sure that the tax rate was set ahead of the collector of taxes sending out the tax bills prior to January 1st.
Just because I know for myself, right now, based upon that assessment, I'm looking at almost $1,600 in an increase for the year. So I just want to be able to know, am I looking at like another $500? Like, where, you know, what I mean? Is that number going to be pretty close to that assessment right now? Is that what you're saying?
Should be pretty close.
Okay, thank you.
In the interest of time, we'll look and see, is there anybody else that wanted to speak? You did, sir?
How you doing, folks? Joe Cermiak, 25 Del Sandro Ave. I guess I'll ask you all, is there anyone that really thinks that it's right 33% compared to 2.5%? Is that, how can that make any sense at all? Maybe 10%, you know, from 2.5, okay, that would be quite a leap. But 33? How can that be even justified? You know, I can't comprehend it. How could it be from 2.5% to 33%? Like I say, maybe 10%, okay, everybody lays down and pays. But, you know, there's a lot of people out there hurting, trying to pay their bills. Extra $1,000 a year. This, you know, that's asking a lot out of people. You know, or more, that's $1,000. No, this other one was just there, said $1,600 a year. $1,600 on top. How, you know, how about the people out there that are elderly, who've been living in this town for 50, 60 years? Living in their houses, maybe paid $10,000 brand new for their house. Now their houses, they're gonna say it's $500,000. And look at the money that they're paying on there. My house is gonna be 70 years old. On my deed says that my dwelling is built and to last for 100 years. So at 70 years through its lifespan, all of a sudden, my house was $13,500 brand new. And now you're gonna say it's almost $300,000? I mean, it's a 2-bedroom ranch. I don't know, I don't know, 33% is just way out of line. It's just hands down unacceptable, hands down. I don't even know how you guys could even sit there and ask people for that. Takes a lot of guts to do it, I give you that, but, okay? Anybody got an answer? What do you think?
Oh, I'll answer.
Do you think that 33% is a lot?
You know what, you're right, it is. And I'm not, we're not, you know, we went through, we looked at our numbers. Our budget, like we said, is a level funded budget. We're trying to provide options, and we're giving you the option of, do we want to set up a stabilization account? You can vote no, and that's why we're giving you the opportunity.
Yeah.
Hold on just a minute. That's why we made sure we had one forum, it wasn't well attended. We knew people wanted to be able to talk. We held another forum because we want people to, we want it to be a discussion, and we want to have people to be able to go and vote and know what they're voting on.
Well, where would you, all these people get this information to where and when these meetings are being held? Some people, I don't do any of that. I don't even know how to get on. I can't even hardly use a cell phone, for Christ's sake. I'll be honest with you. I can't get on the computer. Good thing I can't get on that computer because I'm probably in big trouble.
Yeah, so we talked quite a bit about that and what's the right methods to get it out. And there was some, our last session, there was also some good ideas about getting the big sign out on Main Street. There was a miss in the Webster Times, it should have been in there earlier. And, too little, too late. And then there is a host of electronic methods that might not be popular with everybody, including every one of our meetings is on YouTube and live. It was on the town page of Facebook, Instagram, and cable, public access TV.
What if you don't have cable TV? A lot of people can't afford to have cable TV.
So, sir, that's why there was all those different options. I know there's no flavor for everybody.
All right, just seems like you're trying to pull the wool over people's eyes and slide
That's absolutely
things by.
not the case, sir. That's absolutely
It
not
might
the
not
case.
be the case, but it certainly looks like that sometimes. That's all I'm saying. It
Okay,
certainly
thank
looks
you.
like that sometimes. Okay, can I ask one more question?
You just said that's all you gotta say.
One more thing I want to ask, okay? School superintendent, I had a couple of questions for him. On school superintendent, is all the building maintenance and everything is on your shoulders? Like for all the construction and you have a engineering degree or something in this? Or to be able to know what kind of improvements you need on the building or the conditions of the building? Or is there a committee that takes care of that for you? Or I'm just not sure.
No, I do not have an engineering degree as a superintendent for the Dudley Charleston Regional School Districts. We do have a director of public schools for us, which for add some clarity here, is saving us hundreds of thousands of dollars acting as our project manager for the roof projects for our schools. All you have to do is take a tour of this building to understand that there's a problem with the roof in this particular school, as well as Charleston Middle School. Part of the capital project that was approved in September by the voters included a look at all of our buildings, depending upon what the price of the roofs was going to come out to be, so that we can actually take a look at that. When you look at the Mass School Building Authority, there's a requirement that you have an owner's project manager for that. There's a requirement that you have an architect that comes in and reviews everything for you. That's why it's a costly endeavor for that.
Right, I was just wasn't sure how that all could, like the conditions of the school and whatever could be on your shoulders also. I'm not sure exactly what your job entails.
Keep in mind, as a community, the last major investment in the public schools for Dudley Charlton was the year 2000 for this school and for the Charlton Middle School. That was a large major capital improvement for the schools in Dudley Charlton.
Yeah. Well, one more thing, in your high school, you get a pretty good drug problem and a bullying issues that go on up at that school. And I think you should really take a deep look into what's going on inside that high school.
Thank you for that feedback, and I would invite you to either call and schedule an appointment with me to talk in more detail, because we do act on information that we receive, and we welcome that at any time, as well as Principal Elwell, who's sitting in the audience right here this evening. He would welcome that as well. So thank you for that information, but please feel free to give us a call and let us know more information, because we will act on it.
Okay. Can I ask one more question? Just as far as things go on, how we collect money for the town. Like this year, I noticed that we didn't really have a lot of snowstorms, and we must budget money to plow the roads and everything, and we had hardly any snow plowing this year. Is there any money left over for something like that that could help us with schools, or we can't use that money towards that, or? I was just wondering how that worked.
Snow and ice.
Yeah, so if there's a balance that goes back and is able to be used for other purposes, but.
Is that something that we could use to improve a school or something, or?
Rich, you want to answer that? John?
You want to get into a 20-minute discussion?
No. A short, sweet one.
I just didn't know.
My apologies, good evening. There is a dollar amount.
snow and ice, you are allowed to overspend it. And I agree. There are some years where it is a modest winter and not all of it is spent. There are also terrible winters or terrible individual storms where you're spending a lot of money. The money that's overspent, and it's allowed to by law, if we have monies in other accounts, it is better to go through and do your end of year transfers to get it down to zero. Just because you didn't spend that money, and it's not $10 million, I want to say, pardon? 95, and it's always been my thought that that just about pays for the salt and the sand that goes into the building.
Did we have sand this year?
Salt,
Is that the highway department?
No, it's the salt.
just salt. And that's another
Because
concern.
we used to have sand down at the town barn that you could go for your driveway, but that is.
So we're gonna try to keep it germane to the
Yeah,
approximate.
I know. My main question was about if we could use the snowplow money that we didn't use to go towards something else
Yep.
that was worthwhile.
Absolutely.
We're gonna go with the last two questions we have. This one, and then the gentleman in the back. Mine's not really. That's okay.
Mine's not a question, mine's a suggestion. A lot of people, especially elderly, don't really even read the paper, don't do electronics, don't go on websites, they do not use the sources that you say that you put the information out there for town meetings, voting. How about using the Dudley Alert? They all answer that. And putting your message in the Dudley Alert so the people of the town of Dudley are aware of the voting, of the town meetings, or whatever. If you want to get the word out there, that's the way to do it, because people actually listen to them. So that's a suggestion.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Dan Duffy, and I'm a teacher at Shepherd Hill Regional High School. I grew up in Charlton, and I went through our school systems from K through 12. This is my 9th year teaching at Shepherd Hill. I know it's very easy to look at all the numbers and all the spreadsheets and the amount that things are going to go up. But as someone who's on the ground at Shepherd Hill, who sees it every day, I would like to echo Superintendent LaMarche and Mrs. Carmignani, that we are a bare bones district. We have cut 16.5 positions since 2021. There is nothing left to cut. It's been said at meeting after meeting after meeting. Any cuts at this point will fundamentally change the experience that our students have in our districts. And while we are talking about raising the tax rates up to $13.5 per thousand, the last time taxes went up in Dudley was in 2019. They have, and that was too, the same rate that they are looking to bring it up to today. So your taxes have decreased 33% over the past 4 years. There was a pandemic. Taxes went down, I think, to alleviate families, and the school system went through a lot of changes in a very short period of time. We have just recently started to rebuild some of the programs that were hurt by that pandemic. Our athletic programs, our extracurricular activities. And some of the unforeseen consequences that we're not talking about are, if we destroy our school system, what will happen to the property values then? People have always come to Dudley and Charlton for our schools. We do a lot with not a lot of money. We have one of the best advanced placement programs in the state, which means our students are earning college credit for almost free during high school, which they can then take to college. We have multiple athletic programs that have sent students off to D1 schools with full athletic scholarships. We just had one of our alums sign the highest paid contract for a guard in NFL history. So while we're considering the amount the taxes will go up, we should also consider what the school district brings back to the town and to the people of it. And I know $1,200 a year is a lot, but it's also $23 a week. It's a couple pizzas or half a dozen eggs lately. But in general, the school does bring a lot back to the community. And our kids deserve the funding. They deserve the programs that we were all offered as well. Thank you.
What was the question? Was it a question or?
No question.
Oh.
All right, so, final words from the board, anyone, selectmen, any final words? I'll just, Mr. Marsh.
I just want to thank everyone for coming out this evening and giving us the opportunity to answer some questions. We did hear a lot about debt exclusion versus the proposition override. I just want to share where we stand as a school district to try to help clarify that a little bit more. Keep in mind, in September of 2022, the town of Dudley and the town of Charlton approved an override, actually approved a capital program to replace the roofs at the two schools. It did not approve a funding mechanism for that. So at some point in time, a bill will be coming from the district to the towns to help pay for it. Now, I know that doesn't completely explain what was asked today, but you have to understand the position that we are in as a school district. We are, not only have we advocated for capital improvements to our schools, but we have to advocate for today. We have to advocate for tomorrow. We have to advocate for next year. So we know that there's a lot of money involved in all of this. So the roof is definitely one thing, and it's a costly item for you as taxpayers. But also the $3.6 million increase to our budget is a compromise to our students and their future and their experience going forward, which is why we combine everything together in one place. Because we're not asking you to vote for the capital and then not vote for the operational, which would compromise our students' experience by $3.6 million. So we have to advocate not only for the facilities that you've invested a lot of money in, that opened up in the year 2000, and those roofs are failing. 22 years later, these roofs are failing, and they need to be replaced. But we don't want to also compromise the student experience at the same time because of the large increase to our operating budget of $3.6 million for fixed costs. We're only moving towards a level service budget. The override is not adding new things to our budget. It is not adding new things for our student experience. It's maintaining what we currently provide our students. So again, it was a very difficult ask, but our job was to not only advocate for the facilities in which you built, in which you supported over the years, but also advocate for the student experience today, tomorrow, and the following years. Again, thank you for your time this evening.
Thank you again. I know that there were a couple more questions, and I'm sorry that we couldn't get to them right now. We will be here at the end, so if you have a particular question, you can come up and ask us individually. But again, on behalf of the school committee, I just want to thank you for coming tonight. Whether you vote for it or against it, thank you for coming and listening, because that's really the important thing. And just as a plus, there is a position that we will need to fill in the election, so if someone would like to run, we would like to have you.
Thank you all.